She woke up around midnight to find Bear pressed against her side, his enormous body curled protectively around her arm, purring low and steady like an engine that never stopped running. His face still looked the same, still stern, still unreadable, but his body told a completely different story. Little did she know, this was only the beginning. Over the following months, a pattern started to emerge, one so consistent that Rachel started setting a small notebook on her nightstand just to track it. Almost every night, somewhere close to 3 a.m., Bear would leave whatever spot he'd claimed and walk directly to Rachel's bedroom door. He wouldn't meow, he wouldn't scratch, he would simply sit, facing the hallway, as still as a statue for nearly an hour. At first, Rachel thought it was random. Then she noticed something odd. The nights he did this were almost always the nights she'd forgotten to lock the back door, or left a window cracked open, or came home late and distracted. She started testing it, almost like an experiment. On nights when everything in the house was locked and quiet by 10, Bear stayed curled up wherever he pleased, asleep by midnight like any ordinary cat. But on nights when something was even slightly out of place, a door not quite latched, a strange car parked outside too long, a dog barking later than normal, he rose from wherever he was resting and took up that same position by her door right around 3 a.m. without fail. Rachel felt embarrassed for ever doubting him. I see you still haven't subscribed. Honestly, that breaks my heart a little. Hit that button right now. Stories like Bear's deserve to be seen by more than a handful of people. One night in early spring, Rachel woke up to a sound she couldn't immediately place, a low, rhythmic thump coming from somewhere near the front of the house. She sat up in bed, heart pounding, and found Bear already standing at her door, fur raised slightly along his spine, eyes locked in the hallway. He wasn't looking at her, he was looking past her, toward the living room, and then at exactly 3:14 a.m., everything changed. Rachel followed him down the hallway, phone flashlight in hand, and found that the side gate to her backyard had blown open in the wind, banging against the fence with every gust. It was nothing dangerous, just noise, just weather, but Bear had heard it minutes before Rachel ever woke up, and instead of hiding, instead of running, he had positioned himself exactly between the sound and her bedroom door. He stood there unmoving until she came to check it herself. Her hands were shaking slightly as she latched the gate back into place, and when she turned around, Bear was still sitting exactly where she'd left him, watching the door like it might swing open again. She knelt beside him on the cold tile, half expecting him to walk away. Instead, he leaned his enormous head into her shoulder and stayed there, purring while the wind kept rattling the windows outside. It was the first time Rachel understood that the distance she'd felt from him for months had never been distance at all. It had been him working, quietly, in the only language he knew. What she realized in that hallway would stay with her for a long time afterward. This wasn't a cat with a bad temper. This was a cat who had quietly assigned himself a job and had been doing it every single night without anyone ever noticing or thanking him for it. Rachel started paying closer attention after that. She noticed how Bear positioned himself near the baby monitor when her niece stayed over, though he'd never once shown interest in children before. She noticed how he sat by the window during storms, watching the trees bend as if standing guard. She noticed how, despite that same unmoved expression, he leaned his enormous head into her hand every time she reached for him. His face never changed, but everything underneath it had. From that moment on, Rachel stopped apologizing for how her cat looked in photos. She started posting videos instead. Bear sitting by the door at 3 a.m., Bear curled protectively around a sleeping toddler, Bear pressing his enormous head into her palm with an expression that never once softened. The comments were full of people saying the exact same thing they always said about him. He looks so mad. Is he okay? And every time, Rachel would write back the same simple answer. That's just his face. Watch what he actually does. People started watching more closely after that, and something shifted in how they saw him. They stopped seeing an angry giant and started seeing a quiet, devoted protector who simply never learned how to look the part. Bear is 7 years old now. He has still not changed his expression once, not during storms, not during long naps, not even when Rachel's newest kitten climbs on his back and falls asleep there. But he has never once missed a night at that door. Maybe some of the most loyal hearts are hidden behind the sternest faces. Maybe love was never supposed to announce itself with a smile. Would you have judged Bear by his face the moment you saw him? Or would you have waited to see what he actually did in the quiet hours nobody else was watching? Tell me in the comments. A 24-pound Maine Coon had a face that made grown men step back. Everyone who met him said the same thing. That cat looks furious. Nobody in the neighborhood knew what he actually did every single night at exactly 3:14 a.m. But to understand why, we have to go back to the beginning, and what his family discovered would completely change how they saw him. His name was Bear. Rachel adopted him from a rescue when he was already 2 years old, already fully grown, already wearing that permanent scowl that seemed carved into his face. The shelter staff warned her. "He looks angry in every photo," one of them said. "People keep passing him over." Rachel almost did too. She stood in front of his enclosure for nearly 10 minutes, watching this enormous cream-colored giant stare back at her with narrowed eyes and a flattened brow. He didn't blink. He didn't move. He just watched. Something about that stillness pulled her in instead of pushing her away. She brought him home that same afternoon. The first few weeks were quiet in the strangest way. Bear wouldn't sit on the couch. He wouldn't sleep in the cat bed she bought. He positioned himself near doorways, near windows, near the edges of rooms, always watching, always still, always wearing that same unreadable expression. Friends who visited assumed he hated them. "Is he okay?" they'd ask. "He looks like he wants to bite someone." Rachel would laugh it off, but even she wasn't completely sure. She had never lived with a Maine Coon before. She didn't know that this breed's heavy brow and broad jaw were simply built that way, that the angry resting face had nothing to do with mood and everything to do with bone structure. All she knew was that her new cat looked like he was constantly 1 second away from a fight. Her mother visited during the second week and refused to get within 3 feet of him. "That is not a happy animal," she said, backing towards the kitchen. "Look at his eyebrows. He's judging both of us right now." Rachel tried the usual things: feather toys, treats from her palm, the soft, high voice people use with animals they're trying to win over. Bear watched all of it with the same flat, unimpressed expression, as if evaluating her performance and finding it merely adequate. There were nights that first month when Rachel questioned whether she'd made a mistake, whether this enormous, silent animal would ever actually bond with her, or whether she'd simply spend years living with a roommate who tolerated her at best. But what happened next would change everything. It started small. Rachel worked long shifts and came home exhausted most nights. One evening, she fell asleep on the couch with the television still on, one arm hanging off the cushion.